Next would be Anantha. He said, don't do a long introduction, just say Anantha and good friend. Please.
Thank you, Naveen, and all dear and respected friends. To our journey, sadhana, adventure of thinking and practice, with I wish to bring this theme of consciousness work as it is coming out. The title of my sharing is New Horizons of Consciousness Work, Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, and the Culling of Alternative Planetary Futures. I wish to begin by remembering these lines from Savitri, where it is written, where Savitri in her dialogue with Yama, the king of death, where Savitri is saying, I trample on thy law with living feet, for to arise in freedom I was born. Dear friends, let us invite ourselves to this act of trampling upon law which creates death. And in that act of trampling, in that meditation of trampling, there is an invitation for realizing the contingent breeze between Savitri and Satyagraha, and also Sri Aurobindo. Now, in being with Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, as we remember these three words, which are not just words, Swaraj, Swadeshi, Satyagraha, to this also invite Savitri. And also let us not forget another word called sedition. As we have heard, Sri Aurobindo was put into prison for which charge? Sedition. And what Savitri is doing, Savitri is trampling on law that creates death. The whole spirit of Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, as they are co-travelers with us in our sadhana and struggle for freedom, a freedom which is an expanded freedom, a planetary freedom. So we need to realize this essential link between Savitri, sedition, and Satyagraha, and invite ourselves to what is our sense of struggle and sadhana in this sense of context. If Savitri is engaged in a sadhana and struggle to bring life to Satyavan, literally and symbolically, now what is the challenge before us today? I need not elaborate how even a small school-going girl in Karnataka and her mother have been put into sedition charge. And it is in that context, as we thinking about our human existence in our cultures and nations, now Savitri, sedition, Sri Aurobindo, Satyagraha, Kashmir, India, Tibet, we have a Tibetan pavilion here, Palestine, China, as you can appreciate, that our brothers and sisters, our fellow soul beings in Kashmir, Palestine, and Tibet, they are as much divine beings as ourselves. It is in this context, what is the challenge for transformation? What, building on both Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, we need to articulate, cultivate a modality of thinking which is simultaneously local, national, and post-national. And this is the challenge of rethinking self-culture nations in the world. My dear friend Richard Hirsch from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, in his long journey with Savitri, he mentions that how Savitri was Sri Aurobindo's experiment from 1915 for 30 years. And you know Gandhi came to India in 1915. Therefore, in a way, Savitri is also Sri Aurobindo's experiment with truth, a prayoga. And it is in that sense we also need to rethink Satyagraha, link between Satyagraha and integral yoga. Now Satyagraha, as we can realize, it is not just a political mobilization. It is a multidimensional mobilization of life. And it is in that context, there is a fundamental link between Satyagraha and integral in the sense that the whole journey of Satyagraha is both a vertical journey in terms of overcoming our temptation to hatred, to treat the other as an enemy. Therefore, the journey of a satyagraha is a fundamental journey of overcoming the dualism between the self and the other. Is it not that the spirit of integral yoga also? And therefore, the vertical and the horizontal and the unfolding spiral, and here we can also build how Gandhi built upon this deep tradition of Jainism called Anekantavada, which is really an Anekanta Patha today, and then Satyagraha and Triguna. How do we overcome Sattvas, Rajas and Tamas? In a way, the whole sadhana and struggle of Savitri is also being with Guna and overcoming the limitations of Guna. And as we think about it, if Savitri is trying to give life to Satyavan, now as we are co-workers of Savitri today with Swadeshi, Swaraj and Satyagraha, in the context of death of sedition, how do we give birth to not only Satyavan, the loved one, but the dead child which is floating to our soul? 3-4 years ago, you might remember the picture of the dead child. And how do we write an epic of Savitri in the context of the dead child, including the girl who has been charged, put into prison in the name of sedition? And here, let us invite another Savitri-like scholar and being. Her name is Hannah Arendt, who fought against totalitarianism. And Hannah Arendt says that the fundamental fact is that we are born. Because we are born, we have a right to write. And it is in that context, this ability to give birth and to live, I would like to link both Hannah Arendt and Savitri with Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo with these three challenges of generativity. How do we generate in the context of a structural and soul power which is bent on killing and destroying? And how do we create a climate of generosity and through that create generations? And these generations are not just the one to the other, the generations are cosmic generations, epochal generations. So consciousness work in this context, with and beyond Savitri, is the task of creating a new axial age revolution. Of course, you might realize that every day in Auroville is a Women's Day, very good. But even the religious systems that we have are against which both Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo struggled. It continues the celebrated but the problematic tradition of what Karl Jaspers, the historian and philosopher, called axial age civilization. And what was that? All these axial age religions, starting from ancient Hebrew via Confucianism and Brahminical Vedanta, Vedic Brahminism, and including Christianity, they were patriarchal. And therefore, today the violence that we are living today is a product of this axial age patriarchal killing of the mother goddesses. I would like to invite us to think about consciousness work vis-a-vis that realizing consciousness itself is a multidimensional thinking, that consciousness is not just a product of society and history, because Marx would say, even Marx didn't have a deterministic view of consciousness. But at the same time today, in thinking about consciousness, we need to realize the simultaneous influence of society and history on the one hand, and at the same time the power of the soul and co-souls to overcome determinism. This is consciousness work. It is in this context we can bring Marx, Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, and also another ethical thinker. His name is Levinas, Emmanuel Levinas, who says in a very Gandhi-like manner, he says that the very act of ethics is to look up to the face of the other. And in the morning we said that how Sri Aurobindo wanted to see God face to face. So that act of looking up to the face of the other, that means we are not too egocentric. So consciousness work in this context. Consciousness work for freedom. We might remember here Paulo Freire, who almost 50 years ago wrote a book called Cultural Work for Freedom. I would like to bring that dimension of cultural work, to bring consciousness work of for not only freedom but also responsibility. And that consciousness work is a cultural work today, what we are doing. And how new methodologies and practices of cultural work that we would have to initiate about language and many things, which also involves a memory work. Sri Aurobindo, Secret of the Veda, the Indian Renaissance. It is an invitation for a memory work, but a memory work which is also a memory meditation. If we bring another fellow traveler, Michael Foucault, who talks about archaeology of knowledge, but what is that archaeology of knowledge? Foucault says that we have texts, we have monuments, but I am linking to this notion of knowledge from text and monuments to the dynamics of movements. So with Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, with their new hermeneutics of reading texts, and here I want to bring that Sri Aurobindo challenges us to realize the significance of Sudra Bhakti and Sudra Sakti. And the Sri Aurobindo's reading of the text is not just orthodox. Gandhi's reading of Gita is not orthodox. There is a Sudra hermeneutics to an outsider hermeneutics and non-Brahminical hermeneutics to Gandhi's reading of text. So that kind of a new hermeneutics of life, which begins with the fact that as we move from one position to the other, so we are able to know things differently, which would be a seed for a different future. George Santayana, the great poet, philosopher in 1910, in his book Three Philosophical Poets, he discussed the work of Lucretius and Dante and Goethe. And he is looking for a future poet who's tried to combine the naturalism of Lucretius and the kind of Dante's medievalism, kind of a medieval divinity, and Goethe's sense of combination. And my friend Richard Haas suggests that Santayana might have looked at Sri Aurobindo as bringing these three elements together, man, nature and divine. And in a cross-cultural sense, we can invite here Raimundo Panikkar, the great thinker, who also has written a book called Vedic Mantra Manjari on the Vedas. Panikkar says that the calling before us is cosmocentric, cosmic, the human, which is post-anthropocentric. Very quickly, I would like to bring the notion of freedom, Swaraj. But in Chinese struggle, there was a notion of Jifan. And we might remember Sri Aurobindo's brief dialogue with China as one Chinese scholar, Fu Su, came and studied here. There are many things to be done here. I would just like to bring that the whole new planetary future, it emerges out of these historical and contemporary struggles, including Ubuntu. At the same time, Sri Aurobindo challenges us to rethink fundamentally the idea of state. His pregnant eternal line in Ideals of Human Unity is that unless we rethink the state idea and the person idea and their essential dualism, we cannot move beyond. It is in this sense that as we rethink, we need to bring the question of reconstituting state and society. And here to dialogue, we can bring also Ambedkar and Pandita Ramabai, another inspiring fellow seeker who was born into a Brahmin family, but in her path she embraced Christianity. Very quickly, I would like to bring, submit that the whole challenge of building a different world is confronted with the challenge of global justice. And we know the difficulty of justice today and responsibility through beauty, dignity, and dialogue, and how beauty is a central category in Sri Aurobindo, but also with Gandhi. But that beauty is not an apology of the status quo. That beauty becomes a revolutionary input for imagining things differently. If Sri Aurobindo is challenging us to realize the supramental as it is here, which is not just a fruit in the flower, I would like to invite us to think about that today How do we cultivate our mind in a way which I would like to give a name, the supramental and the cultivation of a social, post-colonial, post-anthropocentric, ecological Gandhi Sri Aurobindo Bodhi Chitta. This whole idea of a different mind. And as we do that, the significance of Sri Aurobindo lies, as Ashish Nandi says, that if Kipling was born in India, but he continued the colonialist project, Sri Aurobindo, who was grown up in the West, he came back to India and he goes on to write, it would come sometimes. Sri Aurobindo's sickness of mind was a superior cognition of human predicament, which suggests that even the deepest feelings of grandeur and depersonalization could carry intimation of alternative political morality. So today, Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, vis-a-vis the challenges that we have, remembering that Sri Aurobindo had a vision of Krishna in the prison charged with sedition, it is in this context, what is the invitation of a different political and spiritual morality? And in a spirit of co-participation, if you feel like, you can join me in singing these lines. State, political and economic, caste, class and gender, movements and self, transforming machineries of violence, ethical critique and a new aesthetics of commons, collective action and collaborative imagination, transforming state from within and across, state and spirit dancing in an open way. The next one. With Hegel, Kierkegaard, Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo. Going beyond the divide between history and prehistory towards a new unfoldment of potential, state becoming a non-state state, as self becomes a no-self, democracy as political and spiritual, towards a new tapasya of co-emptying and evolution of consciousness, a festival of co-realizations. And I would just like to conclude with one of the aphorisms of Sri Aurobindo, where he is writing that the future of humanity lies in realization of the unrealized potential that just got hinted at in the coming together of the spirit of Buddha, the no-self anatta, and the spirit of Krishna, the Vaishnava spirit of love, it meeting in Lord Jesus Christ in Galilee. And this confluence of these three things, it got inaugurated. But it is the tragedy of history that inauguration has got nipped in the bud. An alternative planetary future, building on history as well as soul, with Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo, invites us to embody the courage of thinking as well as courage of action, which, as Savitri says, we have to trample on law with our living feet. Thank you.